Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to some more Warpforge. And yes, we are back. I took a little bit of a break, as I think everyone must have noticed. Not putting out too much content, not even really playing that much, but things are back in full swing. I was really excited to see the patch notes that came out recently, although there is one big elephant or Eldar in the room, and we'll definitely talk about it today. But I'm just happy to be returning here and put out a poll that I appreciated folks tuning into to see what you guys are looking forward to in the future. I'm trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber goal for this year, and that means I got to put out good quality content that y'all actually are into and want to follow. So today is going to be my first crack back at making content aside from streams, which are really fun, and I love all the people who come through and support me that way. So thank you for doing that too. But with the balance shakeup and some players coming into the fold, some old foes returning, I think there's actually quite a lot to talk about. So we'll go over kind of like big picture meta stuff, go over specific builds, maybe highlight some warlords that folks haven't had as much experience with, and highlight some stuff that I have gotten my hands on in terms of gameplay and just some recommendations. Hoping to do this once a month. I think that's a realistic goal, even with things being busy in the outside world for me. But I'm just happy to be back here with y'all. So let's just get into it. All right. So the ranked meta as of late November 2024. So the three decks that I'm calling breakout, and I'll sort of explain my thought process here, is Jain Zar, to no surprise, I'm sure, of anyone who hasn't been sleeping under a rock this season. Erika and Gordrang, which is kind of that menace rearing his head. Although I still don't think he's anywhere near his old power level. But Jain Zar has kind of taken on the mantle here, and as you can see, before we even get to the tiers, obviously she's doing fairly well at the top. And it's funny because I remember talking to Slither, who's like an excellent player, always like in the running for like top 5, definitely at least top 10. And I remember us talking about Jain Zar and kind of saying that she just didn't seem that great as opposed to other Eldar options before the balance patch. And then they immediately buffed her so that not only does her stun always deal 2 damage, but any other stun ability deals an additional 2 damage. So your Banshee Howl on 3 energy that deals 3 damage now deals 5. Your Banshee, the 4-drop, comes in and deals 2 damage on its own. Obviously off that other stun. It just has made this Warlord absolutely insanely efficient, and also just like one of the best aggressive options, the best aggressive option in the game right now. And I would say just the best deck in the game right now. Now, I think there will be counters. We'll talk about a little bit of that today, but Jain is just head and shoulders above everything else, and that's why she is in tier 1 by herself. And again, this is not a full tier list. This is just highlighting some things that I've been seeing and have wanted to kind of showcase. There's obviously, if we did a full tier list, which we'll do probably every month to some degree, we'll save that video for that discussion. But needless to say, the Eldar, the big Eldar in the room is Jain, and she is just incredibly, incredibly strong. Next up, and I would say much further away in terms of power, is Erika. Now, she did get an interesting treatment. We're seeing a lot of stun, coming out, where now Erika has the ability to stun if you hit a certain faith break point. Now, it's not hard to get there, right? You play your Relics of St. Catherine, and then you're kind of off to the races. So you can deal 3 damage to something and stun lock it every single turn. It is pretty powerful. I've lost games playing Swarmlord into her. I've lost games, I think, playing Gordrang even. Although I think Gordrang could be kind of favored in that matchup to some degree. So I think Erika is going to eke her way somewhere in the bottom of tier 2, or I guess the top of tier 3. But I wonder if it's also about building her appropriately, and maybe she can shine more than I've seen her. I will say, besides Jain, she is the most frequent Warlord I've seen in the last few days. Because I think people really want her to work, and she is a different playstyle. I always actually really liked her. And for a time, she actually seemed like the most viable. And then Junith pushed everyone out of the way. All the sisters, had to go pray in the back. So I kind of have her under also decks to watch out for, because it's hard for me to say. Right now I don't think she has the chops to really compete with some of the top decks. But there might be a world in which you can kind of tech her or build her in a way that could maybe even compete with some of these top strategies. Now, Gordrang, as people may have noticed, now has a heal on his ability. So still no stun, and I think people are going to be happy for that, because that would have been 3 stun augments this patch, which no one, I think, would enjoy. And it's really turned him into, this extremely resilient orc, whether it's from the control role, or I'll take a look at a build today that's kind of like a throwback to a more aggressive classic. I think that Gordrang is here to stay. I think people have kind of overhyped what he's doing. I do think that he's very, very much viable now, and probably pushes out some of the other orc warlords, to be frank, because the healing is really noticeable. And just to quote Slither, there was a game playing into Sisters where he ended the game on 35 health. Just really just nasty. So I think Gordrang is probably here to stay. And if you have wanted to play Gordy, as the King Aquaban calls him, and you're really excited to get back into it, now is the time. And I think it's really just about tweaking the build so that you can really fight Jain, and you can compete with some of the Sisters builds. Because I think there's, he's really got legs here. So that's some of the breakout decks. Tier 1, whether we call it Tier 1 or Tier 0, Jain is there. And then I think these are 5 warlords that I think, are solidly in Tier 2 or are just right below Jain. I think Junith has just proven time and time again to be such a resilient warlord. The late game is basically nigh uncomputable with. And it's just really hard to close out the game against her. Again, it's not going to happen always, right? Sometimes you can kind of, stop her from accumulating faith. But really, it's just so hard to pressure her to the point where you can really close out the game. So I think Junith is here to stay. Magus, although was nerfed, and you're going to see Ursula here, both received what seems like the final round of nerfs to take the discount off of their abilities. Still think they're both great contenders. Magus in particular, because the Gene Stealers cults just have such good units. They're efficient. Most of them are 2-for-1s, or they really synergize very, very well. So I think you just can't go wrong with Magus. As much as I was really tired of 2 to 3 seasons in a row of this guy dominating, I just would be remiss if we didn't talk about him. Although I have a cool Primus deck from a build that BJ had worked on with me from a time ago, and that's something that you're interested, let me know in the comments. I'm probably going to do a video on that. Gordrang here, I think these are all kind of in the top of the Tier 2. And then it gets a little closer, and there are obviously more warlords we could put kind of in this Tier 2, Tier 3 slot. But I've actually really enjoyed Ursula. We'll take a look at that build in the video today. I still think that she just, although Dankler has a lot more viability to him, and I think Leontis can be viable too. I just haven't really found the groove with him. Ursula, kind of mid-range with Vox Operator. I've just always loved that deck construction. And I found the deck to be pretty solid into a lot of the meta so far. It's also no surprise that Astra Militarum, and specifically being able to go wide with them, which Dankler doesn't do as well, I would say, can kind of combat what Jain is doing, right? And stunning units one by one and controlling the board that way. So I do think that Ursula's got some legs there. And then Swarmlord, definitely getting pushed down, I really feel like has gotten noticeably... he has had one of the highest win rates every season. You can grind a lot of games. Generally, he does pretty well. I will say, I actually struggled into a solid draw from Erika. I think you're not going to do well into Jain. And even Gordrang with the heal actually has a little bit more staying power. So I think this might be the first season we see Swarmlord kind of drop out of the higher tier, the most winning decks. I think he's still up there. I think it'd be crazy for me to put him any lower, but I do think that there is more competition, especially considering stun. And Jain deals really well with stealth, and Gordrang now has a little bit more viability, and you can build him in a certain way to control, with like the squig bite or something like that. So I do think that Swarmlord is still going to be good, but will struggle a little bit more than usual. So that takes us through what I would say are like some of the more competitive notes, but decks to watch out for. I do think, and we're going to look at a Nemesis deck today. Again, if you want to think about rogue decks or decks that can be built to beat some of the top tier strategies, I think that Nemesis actually is pretty competitive because if you can build that wide board, I think he has some staying power. Dankler, I think, generally is a really good option right now, and I think, deserves to also be in tier 2 here. But I still feel like Ursula might edge him out. I'm not sure. It depends on the matchups, I think. But Dankler has definitely gotten stronger and more noticeable. And then, obviously, I put good old Erika down here. I think she is more of like she's kind of like a breakout deck because I'm seeing a lot of her. And then a deck to watch out for in the sense that she might settle somewhere nicely into the meta. It's just I'm not so sure where she's going to end up. But not to skip our zealot over here, the guy, Galaron the Pious. He is definitely seeing a lot more play. And I think Chaos, players are happy to play a different Warlord than Abaddon. And it seems like there is a role for him. There is a spot for him. Somewhere in tier 2, somewhere in top of tier 3. I'm actually really excited to experiment with him a little bit more on stream and maybe in a video. So yeah, if there are any builds that you really want to shout out, let me know in the comments what you would like to see. But that's kind of like my little sort of snapshot here. And hopefully it's also highlighting some stuff that maybe folks haven't quite thought about or, are sort of like getting a sense of the meta after it's been kind of settled for about a week or so. And just seeing what's working for them and what's not. And speaking of which, let's get into some decks, and I'll talk about why I've enjoyed playing them and what's going on there. Okay. Don't really need to say much. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of hate in the comments if I pretend that there's a ton of diversity in how to build this Warlord, which I get because it is so frustrating to play against, whether it only does 1 damage in the future as a nerf, or they just take the damage off because now we kind of know that Jain has an ability, like, I don't know, or maybe it only adds 2 to spells or something. Something definitely needs to change because stunning and 2 damage and buffing all of your other stuns is just way over the top. And as you can see, this is a pretty stock build. Another card that really shines is Craft World Convergence. This is perfect. It's cheap. You draw 2 most of the time, or if you really need those stones to get your Eldritch Storm off. Perfect curve filler, very cheap, allows you to keep spamming your stun ability, which you just want to do over and over again. That's why the Guardian Defenders are here as well, just keeping things very cheap. And then, of course, at the top of the curve, your ways to close things out. I always like a cheeky Spirit Seer in there just as sometimes helpful mid to late game flair. Gives you a Vanguard unit, gives you a nice body there. And then I started trying the Shining Spear X-Arch, which I think are just, again, you sort of get to play this like aggro control game where you can just like beat down, you can stun, then you can burn their face. And I've always said that Eldar just a couple burn spells shy of being, probably the best aggro option out there. Sorry, old Space Marines. The Ultramarines are not it and haven't been it for quite a long time, sadly. That's probably all I need to say about Jain. If you want to climb to the highest part of Legendary, you probably need to play this deck. It is the meta deck to be playing. But you don't have to play it, and I would say, have as much fun as you want. But dang, this thing is really strong. But let's move on. Mr. Gordrang, and this is a build that I used to play with Gordrang back in the day. especially in a more control meta where you could kind of beat down and do some wacky stuff. So this is definitely not like the control shell. And Slither actually shared a really great build with me, and I can do maybe a video on that as well. That I think will be pretty good in the meta, but I just love more of the beatdown kind of mid-rangey strategy. You know, you're playing the attack squigs. You know, your curve is stopping at Will of Cork. Obviously, you've got all the healing, but you've got the two proper killy. You know, really going in on just beating them down. And the double scorch assault. There's a lot of this like chip damage that you can do. Also, you get that with the backlash from the squig buggy and things like that. And then you're healing all the time, especially using his ability now, healing 1 health for each enemy troop. It really gets kind of crazy how much value you can get while you're also beating down. So this is a build I've just had a lot of fun with. You know, let me know what you think. I think you can build Gordrang definitely much more control, sort of old school. I think that may be more viable, but I just kind of prefer to play this. So that is Mr. Gordy. All right, and then on to what is definitely my favorite Ursula build so far. Just playing a lot of the really good early kind of board control units, and then playing just a ton of Vanguard to the point where you just set up a late game Vox operator into. Also, if you hear screaming in the background, that's my partner playing Mario Party, I think, something like that. So it's lively over here, folks. Yeah, and just being able to slam. I even have that cheeky Manticore in there off Vox Operator to do some work. But I think Leman Russ Vanquisher and Leman Russ Tank just continue to be very, very good options to close out the game. You're just running all of the general good stuff. And even though you're not getting the discount, and so you can't really get all the shenanigans with the ramp vehicle card or even some of the other cards that are way better when they're cheapened, you still just get to draw an extra card. And I just think in a world where Warpforge has evolved to where there's just a lot of efficient units and a lot of efficient warlords, I still think Ursula is a really great option, and my win rate with her has been noticeably positive. So this is the build I'm running. I just enjoy it. I love the Bombast Vox Operator combo ever since Slither and I had talked about it. And I just feel like this is a little bit more just my speed. And you can go wide and have some pretty explosive curve outs, especially if you have Minka. So yeah, this is what I would recommend for Ursula at the moment. And to round things out, not a deck that I play often, but I did play it on stream, tweaked it a little bit, and just kind of was getting into the groove with it, is Nemezer. And I really think that Flayed One's pack has been something that always felt very, very strong to me, but that you just maybe couldn't always enable it. But I do think if the meta shifts to sort of, I don't think it's great into Gordrang, I will say that, because they're going to heal a lot. But I think if it's really all about kind of Jain, and all about some of these more like aggressive strategies, or people are trying to beat down and sort of play against Jain in that way, I think that Nemezer into Eldar, specifically, can be a real problem. Yes, they have Eldritch Storm, but if you're able to keep your remnants through Undying Legions, or just the fact that Nemezer has that for each remnant on both sides of him, that's kind of cool. I also love Damage Hex Mark. This thing can kill people out of nowhere. I think this list has been pretty solid for me. I think it's still kind of up and down in terms of the win rate. But if you're looking for a Necron build, you like playing Necrons, and you want to sort of compete in the meta, I do think that this is a pretty decent option. And I've had a lot of fun playing it. I've actually been enjoying Necrons quite a bit lately. So that's what I got for you today, folks. I hope that this was kind of a nice reintroduction back to the channel. If you're new here, definitely let me know what you think of the video. Feel free to like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. But I'm really hoping to bring y'all more stuff. I'm also trying to get a little bit into editing and just trying to up my game a little bit, which may mean that things come out a little bit slower, but hopefully, the quality makes up for it. So Thanks for sticking with me. Hoping to get some streams going this week, so feel free to stay posted on my community thread on YouTube. And as always, I'll catch you next time.